that's what we're going to talk about today, is the expectation scale. That's a tool that we're going to pass on to you. So sit back, be fed, engage if you like, but you don't have to in this space. This is a chance for us to just give away. And one of the things we like to say is just give the keys to the kingdom away. And this is a part of how we want to do that and just resource our people, our tribe. So our guest coach this morning is Jessica Rimmer, and we had the opportunity to speak and catch up a little bit recently, and just really, really grateful for your time. Jessica, thank you for being with us. This is a part of our tribe, and we're really thankful that we get to share them with you and share you with them. So this is a neat little cross section of Eddie and I's worlds. Lots of close friendships, and a lot of us are in the same boat. We have some business owners, we've got some management, we've got some coaches, and we've got managers. We run the gamut around here, Jessica. So lots of fathers, lots of mothers, brothers and sisters, and from different countries as well. Hey, Carlos. And so we're just really grateful for this time that we get to have with each other. So Jessica, tell us a little bit about yourself. Please share as much as you want to. I'm really inspired, especially by what you guys stand for and what you value at your organization as you try to liberate the people you love and work for.
Love it. Well, thank you, John and Eddie, for having me, and thanks to the group here. I've been working with the Giant Tools for about 9 years. I told John I know that because I was on maternity leave with my middle daughter whenever we hired Giant to come in and help us with communication. My background is higher education. So I was the vice president for student engagement at a college here in Oklahoma. I'm not in Oklahoma right now. And I thought I would do that forever. I really did feel like I was living my calling, which is to bind up the brokenhearted and to set the captives free. And I felt like there was just nothing better than education, Christian education particularly, to do that, because Jesus and education have changed the world. When I found the Giant Tools, I was like, oh my gosh, the philosophy of liberation to fight for the highest possible good in the lives of those that you lead was like, okay, that is what I'm on the planet to do. And so about 2018, I left my job at the university. I'd been there 10 years as the vice president. It felt like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. I had no desire to be a consultant. I thought that word was annoying. I thought consultants were annoying. And so to go out and do consulting was not on my radar, but man, it has been the most fun past 5 years. I've been doing this work full time for 5 years, and the kinds of clients and opportunities and experiences I have had, I couldn't have cooked up if I tried with my best effort. And so I have 7 consultants. I launched Solomon Strategic Advisors 2021. I have 7 consultants that work on my team, and then we have a back office team, and it has been amazing growth and just meaningful work as we've been able to liberate people in all kinds of spaces. Worked with Google, Microsoft, Paycom, just all kinds. And then random, small, tiny manufacturing places. So all kinds of businesses. And I'm really passionate about helping leaders be fully alive.
That's
so
awesome.
That's me.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited to have you and to bring your experience and wisdom. One of the words that Eddie and I have been throwing around lately is that as consultants, we're wisdom brokers. And you mentioned earlier on the phone that people are flooded with a lot of information today, and people don't need just more and more information. We need wisdom. We need truth. We need to see the clarity of what is and what we value so that we stay on mission. Tell us a little bit about our expectations. How do we set those? I'm also curious if you would speak to how boundaries and expectations compare and contrast. But we don't have to get there necessarily. I really am excited to look at and practice for each one of us. And if you are thinking, while Jessica's sharing the tool with us, think of a time, think of a project, think of a person that you have had an expectation with that was not necessarily communicated, it was assumed. And just use that as you're thinking through it, and Jessica's going to lead us through the tool. So we'll pull it up right now. Jessica, take it away.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much. So, uh, I believe that frustration or irritation or disappointment, those are all smoke signals of missed expectations. So when we're experiencing frustration or irritation with another person, it's because there was an expectation. And most of the time, they're expectations that were uncommunicated, but we hold people hostage. Or I'll speak for myself. Y'all could all be saintly, and I'll just speak for myself. I can have a tendency to hold myself um, in that frustrated place because I'm holding somebody else responsible for this expectation I have not yet communicated. And so I've learned, as I kind of know myself to lead myself, when I see that irritation or that frustration, I come back to this language and this tool to go, okay, first of all, what are my expectations here? What are they? And have I communicated them? Like, what are my expectations? Christmas time is a great time to explore this tool because we do kind of regress to the mean when we go home. We go back to being the kid of the mom rather than just the mom of the kid. So the regression to the mean that happens in our homes of origin is usually because our expectations of what family should be or what holidays should be were absorbed over the course of time. So one of the most important things that we can do as leaders, as parents, as people in relationships is to identify what are my expectations. And then before we communicate them. So I don't want us to just go, well, I expect, holidays to be stress-free and I expect my children to be grateful for all the money that I spent. And don't they know that Santa does not have the pockets that its mama, I could work myself into a frenzy. So before I go about communicating my expectations, where do they live on this scale? So I want you to think about the expectation scale as a level. Now, I am the kind of yahoo that likes to just go put a nail in the wall and hang a picture up. And therefore, I have been banned from hanging pictures in our home. Because I like to, eyeball it, hang it up there. It's done and dusted. I'm a creative pioneer, so I like to get things done. And what happens is if you lay a level on top of those pictures that I so dutifully hung, you'll notice that they're slightly off one way or another. So I want you to think about the expectation scale like that level that I put on top of the pictures to go, ooh, my eyes saw it as straight, but actually in reality, it was slightly off. So this expectation scale is like that level. Realistic expectations are always negotiated, and we always have to identify what they are and what we're working with. So you asked about boundaries, John. Boundaries are part of what we're working with, right? If I have an expectation for somebody to take responsibility for my feelings, that's unrealistic and also impossible for us to place that expectation on other people. If I have an expectation for someone to meet all of my emotional needs, I'm placing on that other person something that only God can do. And so when we think about boundaries are always a condition, a constraining condition that we should be working inside of because boundaries are wise. They're the thing that lives around any given relationship, any given situation that tell us what's healthy and what's not healthy. And I think that what is healthy needs to be the paramount question that we ask when we're determining what is realistic. What does healthy look like? What does a healthy relationship look like? Now, we all have tendencies and expectations. Our tendencies can be to not communicate them. Our tendencies can be to tip over and create unrealistic or impossible expectations. And typically the way we lead ourselves in expectation setting is how we lead other people. So I had a dean of students that used to work for me. And gratefully, she shared with me my tendency and what it felt like to be on the other side of my expectations. She said, Jessica, I want you to know that you have one shelf, all the priorities are on it, and they all need to be done right and fast. And she was like, I don't know which thing to do. What she was sharing with me was, you have given us an impossible set of conditions in which to operate. What do you expect from us? And she's asking me to help negotiate what is realistic for her and for the team. And I got to thinking about that feedback that I got, and I thought, you know what? The reason I do that is that's the way that I lead myself. I may, no matter what, come hell or high water, this is going to be done right. It's going to be done fast. It's going to be done well. And we need to make sure that nobody sees a sweat doing it, right? Like it's effortless perfection is the expectation that I have for myself. And therefore I transmit and transmute that expectation pattern on other people. So the expectation scale is it's a tool to help us recognize our own tendencies and also negotiate What is realistic? Now, what can happen, and then I'll, open it up for some dialogue here, John and Eddie, is we can go from, oh man, I do that. I set impossible expectations, and we can overcorrect and begin to limit or resign expectations. Now, I am a high capacity person. I know that. And I also always try to do too much, right? But I'm a high capacity person. So I have to recognize my own capacity as a constraining condition for how I evaluate what's healthy and what's realistic. If I take then my capacity and I put that on my 8-year-old daughter, that's very obviously not realistic. Well, I could look at that situation and go, oh man, never mind. I can't rely on her for anything. Or I could go, no, what's she capable of? What is her capacity? And how do I bring her along in this, chore chart in a way that's realistic to her developmental abilities? So fundamental questions: what's healthy? What are my expectations? And then once I've identified what's realistic or negotiated what's realistic, have I communicated that clearly? And I think that clear communication is like, what does successful completion of this expectation look like? What is someone willing to agree to, right? Because I don't get to overtake your will. So what is someone willing to agree to? And then how do we navigate and negotiate those expectations according to a realistic execution timeline? So I'll stop there, John, but that's how the tool works. What thoughts do you have, John or Eddie, about the expectation scale and tendencies?
I think the first thing is looking at the consequences. Look, and if our tendencies are resigned, it can lead to apathy, abdication. It can lead to overprotection or just a giving up altogether. If our expectations are impossible, that we're placing on others, then that can lead to burnout. So those are my two big takeaways. As far as what is the reality that I'm actually creating? What's it like to be on the other side of me when I'm living in the extremes? Eddie?
As we go through these tools, we tend to collect stories along the way as we consult people, individuals, or teams. Is there any blaring thing that was really helpful with the shelf? It allows me to do your story about you and the lady that worked for you. Is there anything else that has been blaring that you've been like, hey, the expectation skill has really helped this situation? Just because stories help me kind of capture a tool. And this has probably been kind of the newest for me recently.
Yeah. So it's probably not as tangible to me, because I think anything that hits you in the emotional center is the stuff that, you take with you. So that feedback to me was like, one, super brave on her part and very true, right? Like it wasn't just like her reality, it was also my reality. And so that story is probably the most like tangible. I will say I was teaching this tool inside of one of my clients, my very first client, who I still have now. And we have started talking about implicit versus explicit expectations.
Yes.
And we talk a lot about like, what are the implicit expectations that I need to make explicit? And sometimes, at least for myself, I used to feel like that was like talking down to people, and really talking down to people is an attitude of our hearts. It's not something that's going to happen because we're trying to be clear. And so on that journey to being explicit, there are a lot of things that like, I feel like I shouldn't have to say. I shouldn't have to say that. But it's like, until a communication has resulted in shared meaning and shared understanding, until an expectation has resulted in like shared understanding, it's not realistic. Like, again, like the tendency to hold people accountable for expectations I have not communicated and then to act in accordance like I have is just, it's lunacy. And I think at least what I see is I do this the most in the relationships where I take people for granted, right? Like my spouse, well, he should know. We've been together 20 years. I mean, he should know. And I think it's that should know space where I make the most mistakes with expectations. Should, I won't say it how I normally say it. Should and shame belong in a bucket together. And it's the crap bucket, right? Should and shame. And I think that like when I find myself going, well, they should know, it probably is a signal to me that I have not stated my expectations clearly enough. or they haven't been received. We haven't resulted in communication. Yeah, don't should on yourself. Absolutely, John.
Good comment. That's awesome. Well done. The implicit, the uncommunicated expectation is nothing more than premeditated bitterness. We've heard that. Unmet expectation is the root of all frustration. We've heard that. So when you identify that assumed or implicit expectation that you have and you're placing the responsibility on someone else, how do you notice, how do you check yourself real time? What do you do? How do you catch yourself?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. It took me back to boundaries there while you were sharing implicit, explicit, and trying not to hold people responsible for things that really they have a choice, right? So it's like the check is like, what's within my control? What is within my control? And then again, what does healthy look like? So I may have communicated my expectations. I may feel like they're realistic. I may feel like that other person should be able to do that. There's the should again. And also it still may not happen. So then what do I do in that gap between my expectations and my reality? And is that gap behavior reflective of who I am as a person or who I want to be as a person? So I think holding myself accountable to the actions that I take when there's frustration, when I totally have been, and it would be too raw to share it here, but there are plenty of experiences in my life where I totally have been absolutely as clear on my needs, on my hopes, on my desires. And then sometimes I just have to give it to God and go, you know, this other person may not be able to meet my needs. So what is it that I'm going to receive from God that actually goes in that space anyway? And then how do I show up as a liberator to that person? So that's always my role and always my responsibility is to be a liberator. Sometimes it takes a little bit of, you know, like looking in the mirror and recalibrating support and challenge the self.
Yep, that's huge. You know, you just made me think of something that Esther Perel, a world-renowned counselor, psychologist, has said a lot. And it's that we, back in the day when we lived in a village, where it took a village to raise somebody, it's a lot different than the cultures we live in today. And now we expect for one person to fulfill all of our needs. We expect one person to do everything we need and want, when one day we used to expect an entire village to meet those needs.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's a great way to wrap.
Yeah. Eddie, close us up, buddy.
Absolutely. Jess, wonderful having you here. We admire who you are. I'll probably watch this a couple more times just to kind of keep distilling the tool. But yes, thank you for your time, and we appreciate you with us.